Now, what I do, I am not proclaiming to be the best of the best, to be perfectly up to standard. In fact, I don't know jack shit from shine ore compared to my brother-in-law. Get out. When it comes to building stuff. When I say I don't know jack shit from shine ore, I'm not an absolute expert, but I've got a bit of a clue after working on and off for about 7 years in the building industry as to how things go, just done on observation, and a bit of common sense to do with physics and whatnot. You know, my brother-in-law, one of the things he does as a job as being a building engineer and an environmental engineer, which is like a civil engineer with aspects of geology in it, as part of his engineering consulting business. He saves houses from demolition. Now, often enough, there's alternative buildings that have been built not quite right, not up to standards. And he's already saved a double-story one of those from demolition. There's a building that he had that the local government was nice enough, this is on the property he bought, there's a whole heap of illegal modifications and legal structures, and one of them is a really big shed, and I mean a frickin' big shed. It's not very tall, not very wide, but it's shockingly long, and got a roller door on each end. Anyway, the council was nice enough to put it in a under construction status, because realistically, it probably, well, they would have given it a demolition status otherwise and put a demolition order on it, but they said, look, we'll just put an under construction order on it, and then you can fix that place up, and then we'll see how we go from there. And he knew what he had to do to fix it up, and he fixed it up, and it's been passed and everything like that. They basically built it. It looks all right, but the trusses are too far apart, and what happens is your bottom cord, your bottom piece of wood, on your truss actually warps, and it gets like a bow in it. And yeah, he basically doubled up the wood, and then there was some attachments between the upright poles of the shed and that needed to be better done. I think they needed stirrups on it or some, I forget how it all was again, but anyway, that one's all been passed, and that's sort of, you know, that's what he does. He gets places and saves them from demolition, that are usually other people's places, and he's brought in as an engineering consultant to tell them what they need to do to get these things up to standard. And yeah, he has another guy who will give you an occupancy status, because he's still working through the paperwork he needs to be able to give occupancy status himself. But anyway, enough about his business. He might want something to elevate wood off the ground. Now, all this is hardwood. This is done by my uncle. Bit shonky at first. We got bricks and concrete. He had rocks and concrete and stuff like that. Typical carpenter who, I think he finished his apprenticeship in 1965 or started, I can't remember. I think he might have finished it in 1965. Back in the 60s, it was all hardwood, and he notches everything in. And he does it the way that he'd done it, now that he's dead, the way that he had been taught. He never really, wasn't a softwood and nail gun man, because he was out of the business by then. And here's your proper concrete stumps. These are bought. Of course, your concrete is a grade of concrete that will handle weight and is dense enough. Looks like there's a bloody lot of sand in said concrete. And, of course, these, you know, all made with vibrators to get all the air bubbles out and shit like that. But these are $20 each. It's concrete stumps. And once again, he's notched it in to hardwood. Then he's got ones running that way back to the house. And there's more stumps. I think he has it. So there's one stump there, another one at the end, and one in the middle, or there might be two in the middle, I can't remember. But of course I saw this when it was under construction. Now, based on what I know, just by observation, I'll show you what I've done with the other buildings here. About 4 inches of concrete. Bada bing. Made reasonably flat. This was all turned to shit when I just about gave myself a bloody heart attack trying to finish this as one person. She basically goes flat to there and then it's all everywhere, but I was smart enough to know that I have to have the edges flat, and so I got all the edges flat all around there, and just Dynabolts straight into timber. In my experience, we use 35 by 90 at 600mm centres, as opposed to in the States, because we don't have OSB and then tar paper and then, you know, an outer cladding. It doesn't quite work like that here. So we all have basically 24-inch centres. The wood isn't 2x4, which works at 100 by 50. It's 90 by 35 for most of your buildings, your single-story stuff. With your double-story, I've noticed the ground floor is always 90 by 45, and your upper story is 90 by 35, which is, you know, what you just have for single-story buildings. Some of these are actually a little bit 45s anyway. As is the bathroom, I think it's all 90 by 45. Of course, I had that stuff and decided I would use that. But, you know, here we are, you know, and this is like 3.5 years on. The wood's fine, you know. I noticed the wood somebody else is putting on the ground. You know, down here. Fine, it's got a bit of dust and shit. Quite a bit of dust, actually. But it's ultimately fine. It's not rotten. It's not completely up to shit. I know somebody is putting down untreated wood. None of this is treated. Only had a small amount of treated wood. Some which is, the fence posts all around here. A lot of that is the treated pine. And there was some other stuff that's too ridiculously thin to use. Some of this wood wasn't in terribly good condition in the dunny here when I used it. Some of it is more okay. Toilet paper stash. Oh, fucking hell, Black Kitty. Hang on a second. Flaming Black Kitty, if there's ever a place where I don't allow her into, the toilet to be one of them, the door's open, she'll go like hell to get into it. This will probably be very dark. This is the backup shower, which is just full of timber. There you go there. Same again, that's a little bit, at least 4 inches of concrete. And she's Dynabolted in. And yeah. And you're going to go in here too, aren't you? Hey? Couldn't get her out of there yesterday. But anyway, getting out of the wind now. As you can see, that stuff, you know, some of that, there's one or two cords which weren't the best at all, some of the uprights. Only really in this backup shower and the dunny, there's one or two uprights that probably shouldn't have been used. But as you can see, all the stuff on the ground there, hey, it's under several inches of concrete. And when I go ahead and put down, this was all actually, I tried to make a solar heated water shenanigans, so this was all actually clear plastic for a while. But when, you know, you put on your your cladding, which is just a bit of cement sheet here. You run it right to ground level, and it's not going to get in and, you know, wreck everything. Same with these. With the corrugated iron sheets, you can sort of curve them down a little bit, and then you're sort of pretty much right there. I'm not saying this is glorious, but it is pretty common. And I can actually show you houses that people live in that have been built literally a year and a half, 2 years ago, including a particular government-owned building that has corrugated iron outsides. What are you doing in there? Ah, shit. Come on. Oh, shit, the other cat's in there as well. Anyway, while that may look as though it's only roofing material, in Australia we use it as cladding too. And to be quite honest, I think it looks shit. But some people build brand new with it on the sides of buildings. And this is only a 2-bit building for occasional use. It tends to be full of firewood most of the time, so I'm not terribly worried. But anyway, that's the way I've seen things done. These buildings have been here for, 3.5 years, and they're fine, We've got a magical little law to do with the roof space where you can avoid any paperwork entanglements with local government, just so long as you keep the roof space down to a certain size. And that has helped. But anyway, I just thought I'd show you stuff that's been standing there for 3.5 years where the wood hasn't gone rotten, and the way I've done it, which is, generally speaking, gravel and then 4 inches of concrete. And off you go from there. With some of these I've got not Rio mesh, I've just used average Joe Blow mesh. Hell, some of them have even got old fridge racks in the blasted things as some sort of as a bit of a mesh. I've seen concrete pots for plants with chicken wire as their mesh, and it's good to stick that kind of stuff in. It's not the end of the world if you can't get any mesh, but it's better if you can, because it'll hold it structurally a lot better. In fact, the first reinforced concrete was used in, I forget the German name for it, but it's basically Hitler's Forward Command bunker in Poland during World War II, and that was the first time reinforced concrete was used, so that he could avoid dying by being bombed to the shithouse. There's a movie where they go and put a suitcase down which blows up, and Hitler survives and a couple of others get injured in a little shack out the front of said thing. Tom Cruise, you'll know the one I'm talking about. But anyway, yeah. Well, I'm thinking of it, I might as well just show some of the corrugated iron sheets. When you attach to the side, it doesn't really matter. You can have them down in the lower parts. Now, often when you get a kit for a shed or whatever, you'll have short screws which are for the lower dips that you screw into on the side, and then for the this one's better, for the roof you go for the higher dips. And if you're old school, like my uncle was, a lot of these screws are a bit, nails are all bloody loose on this end, and it was sort of flapping a bit, so I went and whacked in all your 5/16 45mm, which is nearly 2-inch long screws. But the old school way was to whack in roofing nails, and I have a shitload of roofing nails, including ones that are twist shank, where your actual shank of your nail is actually sort of spirals. It's like a square shape, but it sort of spirals around, and those ones due to their screw-like characteristics, more or less don't want to come out, which is the entire idea of making them a twist shank. But these would probably just be straight shank. A lot of them are on older buildings. Having said that, there's one exception to all this sort of stuff. And I'll show that in a second. Why that's on the higher pitch is obviously your water sort of goes either side down to the lowest point due to gravity. So in other words, your water will flow off there down into there, just like that, every single time, and then sit in your lower parts and then come up forwards, which is why you want to screw the higher parts, because you don't have a channel of water coming from metres back right down over where there's a bloody hole where you've put the screw in. Oh no, but it won't leak, I've got a rubber seal. Yeah, bullshit. There's a chance that if you screw it in too tight, it actually breaks up the rubber seal. And don't worry, it happens very often, and then it just leaks through anyway. And of course, if you've got roofing nails, you know, they're slightly domed, as you might have seen just then, and your dome's the wrong way, and then, you know, you've got no hope. You'd be surprised at all the roofing nails that they used to stick in back in the day. They would never pre-drill a hole. They'd just line the nail up and give it a good slam, and if you go tappity tap tap tap, little whacks, you'll bend the sheet. If you just hold it in place and give it a bloody good slam the first hit, it'll actually just about, it's like the sudden shock effect will just punch straight through it. It's like sitting there pushing glass with your hand. It'll just wobble and wobble. And if you go bang and really hit it hard, it'll punch straight through. The same thing sort of happens with the sheets, whereas if you wobble and wobble, you'll dent it. But if you slam really hard with your first hit, it'll just punch straight through, and it won't bend the sheet, it'll just punch through it with the point of the nail. And as a result, you know, they build buildings in this, usually sheds and stuff in this country, with corrugated iron sheets, a hammer, and roofing nails, and usually a plane and a chisel set. And they would use just friggin' branches off trees to make the framing. If they needed flat sides, like for the sides of the shed, they would actually plane one side. They would notch everything into each other and slam some big nails through that, and then go and put all the roof sheets on. And fuck, those buildings are still standing today, you know. And there's one across from my sister, which I don't know if you've seen. I did show it while I was there, but not up close. Nah, I never showed it up close, but I'll ask to next time I'm up there, ask the neighbour, because it's owned by the neighbour. They actually use big heavy wooden slabs, which are just chunks of, like 3-inch thick planks against the side, and all that building is all made out of just basically logs, and they've just gone and planed the side that the planks are on, and not the rest of it. The rest of it is just still round as it come out of the forest. Now, as I was saying, the one exception is these kind of sheets. Those you can have short screws, and you've got a little bit of a dip up. I don't know if you can actually see it in some of them. You probably can't because of the light. Now you can see it. A little dip there, a little dip there. You whack your 2 screws into those points, but they're only short screws. You don't go for the tall ones in the middle. You just go for the short ones with these sort. With your corrugated iron, you always go for the higher ridge every time. And that's the way she is. Those sheets are from building pergolas. They're actually left over from when I used to work at the pergola place. And I hoarded up all this old stuff in my father's shed, and then I went to build the roof of this laundry/storage shed thing. And my mum goes, "Oh, why wouldn't you just get new sheets?" And I said, "Well, what was the point of spending years and years hoarding up all these other bloody sheets if I'm then going to throw the bloody things out? tripped over them for years. Why did I even have them in the first place, you know, to turn around and do that? But then, you know, that basically would have added another, minimum 400 or 500 just to roof this thing, but I used entirely sheets that I already had. So, and, you know, why would I hang on to these sheets from building pergolas that were actually brand new sheets, never used, never had a single screw hole put in them, just to throw them out? But anyway, that's the way it is with all that. How those sheets are, the pergola sheets, are actually flat, so your rubber seals will seal properly to them without too much of a problem. And, well, because of the size of the dip in these, you're going to have trouble getting a flat one to seal properly inside the dip, because it'll seal tight either side of the screw, but then it'll be loose in the middle. So you'll have nice tight sides and loose in the middle, right where the bloody hole goes through the sheet, which is the dumbest bloody idea. But yeah, stick with them being on the higher up one, as I have with all these, and you'll be right. I might as well mention polycarbonate and fiberglass, because that many people get stuffed up by this. So many customers, you know, you'd show them the price of polycarbonate, which is actually cheaper than steel sheets. That's your polycarbonate. And this is like 80% the cost of steel sheets. Then you get your fiberglass, which my uncle has actually put upside down, and it's also off-cuts, and that is literally 4 times the price of steel. So when they hear that one's 80% the price of steel and the other one's 4 times the price, they say, oh no, use the polycarbonate. And we say, well, the light won't diffuse. We used to say this every bloody time to these customers, and every time, no, it'll be right, the light will diffuse, it'll be good. And I said, no, you'll have full blaring sunlight and then shadow. And then when you got another one, blaring sunlight and then shadow. Oh no, it'll let the light through, it'll diffuse, it'll be alright. Every bloody time we'd be back there again, changing it over with fiberglass. And if you want the light, if you want light to diffuse through your veranda, trust me on this one. Or your shed, trust me on this, for fuck's sake. You use polycarbonate and it will be complete brightness, and right beside it, complete dark shadow. And it happens every time, and it used to happen just about every single customer, and you could not convince them, because they'd see the price and go, no, we'll go with the cheaper option. And sure as eggs, we'd be back there putting the fiberglass on. Now, because of all the little fibres of it all mashed every which way inside this epoxy, it will diffuse the light on its own, all those fibres, and it works fantastic. And you can have it metres and metres from the sheets, you know, from each other, and it'll light up that area perfectly and spread it out so that you only need to have one every, not even every car length. You know, you can have it even further to get a reasonably even light underneath, you know, your veranda or your shed. And yeah, that works brilliantly like that, and it'll sort of, you know, it'll diffuse enough light between one and the next that you'll get even light if you have them sort of, you know, 5 metres apart, and you can probably even get away with going further. But yeah, polycarbonate, it's fucked. It's bright, glaring, and then complete shadow next to it. And it's just, everyone wants to save $1 and they cock it up in the process. And having experienced that so many times over, having to replace the polycarbonate with fiberglass anyway, after, you know, a month beforehand you build it with polycarbonate because they wanted to save money, trust me, if you want it to diffuse properly, just go fiberglass and save yourself all the bullshit of undoing roof sheets and stuffing around and, you know, basically paying for the polycarbonate and having to more or less throw it out and then buy the expensive stuff that you could have just bought the first time without having to throw your polycarbonate out. But anyway, that's the way I know stuff to be built.